Hi, this is Travis with another video for you guys. So today the topic is going to be stretching, and as usual I'm going to save my 2 cents for the end, but I want to get into this for those of you who just want to get started. I'm going to show basically the stretches that I think will tend to give you the most bang for your buck for most people that have more of the ordinary, kind of muscle restrictions that we tend to see a lot. So if you want to get on a mat, some sort of firm surface, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first one I'm going to show you guys is the child's pose. Pretty straightforward position. A few nuances that you can use to make it a little bit more effective for you though. So typically what you're going to do is start out, pretty much on all fours. Some people put their feet a little more together. That's fine if you want to do that. You can also go a little wider or more apart. Most of you that have any type of groin or pinching, a little bit wider is going to feel better. And then from there, you're just going to kind of sit back as best you can on your heels and try to lay your head down kind of heavy on the mat. Sometimes I see people kind of up here. If you can't get down that far and you're kind of off the mat, this is when one of these blocks can come in handy, or something just to kind of rest your head on. Because ideally, you don't want to be actively holding your head up in the air for too long. You certainly can use a pillow or a towel as well. And then just kind of lay down there and take some nice deep breaths through your belly. So typically I'll go about 3 seconds in and 3 seconds out. So I'll inhale and exhale. Something like that. And for a lot of stretches, ideally probably closer to 45 seconds to a minute. Now for some of you who might have a little more restrictions on one side, a little bit of tightness more on one side of the back, you can also bias one side, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll just rotate a little bit more on the side, opposite the side I'm trying to open up. So in this case I'm opening up that side, or vice versa. If I came over here, I'm now opening up more of that lat area. My head's still heavy on the mat, and then I just take some deep breaths through my belly the same way. Now for those of you who have knee restrictions or have a hard time kind of getting down here, you certainly don't have to go all the way back. Sometimes people can put a little pillow or a towel back, behind their knee, and that can kind of cushion that up, and then they can use a yoga block to kind of get in here in sort of a modified position. And it's just a nice one because it works on, kind of opening up a lot of the chest and shoulder muscles in the front. You get a nice little stretch in the low back as well as the hips. Okay, so the next one I want to show you guys is just a simple sideline stretch. And so typically what I'll do for this one is I'll be down here on my side, and then usually I'm going to take my knee and just kind of cross it. I'll kind of anchor my foot back here if I can, and just sort of let my hips fall down towards this part of the mat, and then let my chest fall the opposite direction, okay? You can use your hand up here to kind of hold this down a little bit if you want. And then from there, again, just take some nice deep breaths through your belly. And so again, you can see here how I just have the weight of my hand pulling down, and I'm just letting this arm essentially fall back towards the mat. And so again, from there, I'm just getting some nice lengthening, opening up kind of this area through here, a little stretch in that kind of hip and glute area. And so again, I would just take some deep breaths through your belly, and then spend a little more time on whatever side feels more restricted if you have one. So you certainly, if you notice you're over here and you're barely getting your leg very far, and then suddenly you're on this side, that side lays down pretty easily, I would say give a little extra time and attention to that more restricted side. You can certainly do, a longer count, or just give it an extra round on that tighter side until you feel like they're fairly even. Okay, so the next stretch I want to show you guys is for the hip flexors. So these are these guys in the front of the hip. And what tends to happen when these muscles don't have good length is they tend to want to tug your pelvis sort of forward. So if these are short, they kind of put you here. And so what they tend to do is they overarch your back sometimes and drop you into a little more of that, what we call anterior pelvic tilt. And so for some of you who have some back pain related to having too much extension in your back, some patients can get relief when they stretch out their hip flexors a bit. And so there's a couple different ways to do this. One of the simplest ways is the side you want to stretch. It's just go into a half kneeling position. Rotate your pelvis just a little bit kind of up toward the ceiling. So almost think about if you had a belt buckle on and you want a sort of pelvis area up toward your chin. So you're going to do that from a half kneeling position. So sort of point your belly button up a little bit and then just slightly lean forward, okay? And for many of you, you may not even need to go that far, and you're going to start to feel that stretch in here. Now some of you who have a little bit more mobility here can probably get into it a little bit lower. Again, with these stretches, you don't really need to feel a big stretch. You can pull muscles definitely when you're stretching too far, So I always say just go for that kind of moderate feeling that you're getting a stretch there, not anything too crazy. So, you know, I'll usually drop a hand on the elbow just to kind of cut myself some slack and just kind of lean forward. You know, certainly if you want to hold on to something, you know, a chair or a foam roller in this case, you know, you can hold on to that guy. Or for those of you who have some of these yoga blocks laying around, you know, you can kind of come forward maybe into a position like this. You just want to get in a position where you're not working super hard to be there, but just feel a little bit of a good stretch in that hip flexor. And so I'd go there again, you know, maybe 45, 60 seconds, you know, nice deep breaths through your belly, and then obviously switch sides, and then come in there and get the other one. Okay, so another stretch that I really like that works pretty well with the general population is a stretch that's sort of like a modified child's pose, only you're gonna have your elbows on top of something that's elevated. So some of you might like to do this on the couch or something a little more cushiony. You can certainly put some towels or something to sort of cushion up your elbows. So this is gonna be a great stretch in the triceps, particularly on the long head. You're gonna feel some lats, and some of you might even get into that pec area. So as long as you're not feeling any pinching in the shoulder, you should be fine. And so what I'll do is just come into a kneeling position, put my elbows on top, in this case of the chair, and just kind of drop my body in here. Let my head just fall in between my arms. And as far as what your hands are doing, you know, you could be out here, but when you drop your hands back, it stretches those triceps a little more. And then just like the others, a couple of deep breaths in this position. You know, you may find you're able to sink into it a little bit easier with time. And again, you know, 45, 60 seconds should be a pretty good count on that one. For those of you that have a hard time with this one though, you certainly can do the child's pose. This one's just a little more specific to the upper body. And I also like the way you get a little more extension in the middle of your back on this one. So with child's pose, you tend to be a little more flexed versus here, your back's a little more extended. So it's a little bit of a different stretch on the back. Okay, so the last stretch I want to show you guys, this is one of the tried and true stretches for the pecs. So, and a lot of times clinicians will tell somebody to, you know, hang onto a door and just kind of turn that way. And you know, that's totally fine, but that sometimes will stretch out the capsule in the front of the shoulder a little bit more. So if you want to get a little more into the pecs, I tend to like the one on the wall. And so all I'm going to do is just throw my hands up on the wall. I tend to stagger my stance a little bit so that I'm not overarching my back too much. You know, a little arch in the back is okay. And then all you're going to do is just position those hands comfortably on the wall and just lean forward. And as soon as you feel that stretch in the pecs, you should be good. You know, again, right across, you know, anywhere kind of across this general region here. You know, a couple of deep breaths while you're there again, just like all the others. You know, you can play around with the position of your arms a little bit, you know, a little lower versus kind of biasing a little higher, as long as just the pecs and no pinching, you know, and there's no perfect way to do this, I would say. So, you know, wherever it feels more restricted for you, that's probably a good place to go. Sometimes coming down here a little bit lower and then coming forward can also be a fine way to do that. Some people will feel that a little bit more kind of deep underneath where that pec minor lives. So that's a great one for those of you who are a little more restricted in those pec muscles and kind of feel like you're getting pulled in that forward position. Okay, so as far as my 2 cents on stretching, you know, who's it for and who's it not for? You know, the research on stretching is not quite as promising as a lot of people will think. A lot of people will tell you that it's great to reduce injuries and it's great to, you know, help reduce soreness and things like that. And the research really hasn't been that promising in those areas. You know, just because you stretch doesn't mean you're going to be necessarily at a lower risk of injury per se, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to recover quicker from workouts. You know, it may have some ability to help alleviate some of that feeling you might have of soreness. It's not necessarily always a good thing to do where, you know, more is always better. If you have too much, you know, flexibility and not enough mobility where, you know, you can kind of move through those positions with a certain degree of strength, then that can create what we call instability, and that's definitely a problem. So to a degree, you sometimes do want a little bit of stiffness. One thing that we've seen through research is that just general strength training through a full range of motion tends to actually increase flexibility and mobility. And so if you're pressed for time and you don't have time to necessarily spend, you know, an extra 10 or 15 minutes stretching, you certainly can just do some strength training, and that tends to cover your bases as long as you're covering most of your major muscle groups. Now, for some of you who have more specific needs though, stretching may be indicated. That being said, for many people, they do have some common restrictions. And so I think these 5 stretches will do a nice job addressing some of the more common ones. Feel free to comment below, let me know what you think. And as usual, if you're liking this stuff, go ahead and subscribe. And as always, I hope you guys have some fun.